My wife mocked me at dinner with her lover, not knowing I owned his company. Why was she so confident humiliating her husband in front of another man? What would happen when she discovered who truly controlled her lover's future? Hello, everyone, and welcome to KFIVE Stories, where betrayal, hidden power, and unforgettable consequences collide. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another dramatic story. Thank you for every view, comment, and moment you spend with us. Your continued support helps our storytelling community grow stronger every day. Tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from and what time it is there right now. We always enjoy hearing from viewers across the globe. Now, settle in, pay close attention, and let us step into the opening moments of today's gripping story. You know what the saddest thing about Ethan is? My wife asked, smiling at the man whose hand had been resting on her chair all evening. The question floated across the candlelit table so casually that, for half a second, I wondered whether Vanessa had forgotten I was sitting directly across from her. Blake Harrison leaned back in his seat, expensive suit open at the collar, his grin polished by years of getting away with things. "What's that?" he asked, though the anticipation in his eyes told me they had shared this joke before. Vanessa lifted her wine glass and watched the red liquid circle the crystal. "He used to have ambition." The people around the table laughed. Not loudly at first, just enough to let me know everyone understood who the evening's entertainment was supposed to be. I didn't move. The restaurant glowed beneath low amber lights, all dark wood, white linen, and silverware arranged with military precision. Rain streaked the windows overlooking downtown Chicago, turning the city lights into blurred ribbons of gold. Blake had chosen the place because Sterling Dynamics kept a corporate account there. He had mentioned that twice already. Men like Blake rarely paid for anything when they could make someone else feel privileged to cover the bill. Vanessa sat beside him instead of beside me. She claimed it was easier because they needed to discuss an upcoming presentation. But presentations did not require her knee to touch his beneath the table. They did not require his fingers to brush the bare skin between her shoulder and the emerald fabric of her dress. And they certainly did not explain the hotel charges I had reviewed 3 nights earlier. Blake raised his glass toward me. "Come on, Ethan. Don't look so serious. We're all friends here. Are we?" I asked. My voice came out calm. That seemed to bother him more than anger would have. He laughed and glanced at the 2 executives seated beside him. "Vanessa says you're taking some time to figure out your next chapter." That was how she described me now. Not retired. Not an investor. Not the founder of anything. Just a man trapped between chapters while she moved forward without him. "I work from home," I said. "Doing what?" Blake asked. Thinking. Another ripple of laughter moved around the table. Vanessa covered her smile with the rim of her glass, but I saw it. Her laughter was always the part that cut deepest. A stranger's contempt can bruise your pride. Your wife's contempt finds the bones. Blake leaned forward, lowering his voice as if he were offering advice. "No offense, but a woman like Vanessa needs a man who can keep up. Someone with drive. Someone with real responsibility." Vanessa placed her hand on his sleeve. She did not remove it. "At least Blake knows what an ambitious man looks like," she said. The table erupted this time. I looked down at my watch. 9:17 p.m. The second hand crossed the face with a quiet, mechanical certainty. I took out my phone. Vanessa sighed. "Please don't hide behind your screen, Ethan. We're trying to include you." I opened Daniel Brooks's message. The audit package was ready. The preservation orders had been drafted. The emergency board notice only needed my authorization. I typed one word. "Proceed." Somewhere beneath the table, Blake's phone vibrated. He ignored it. Then it vibrated again. And again. His smile tightened as he pulled it from his pocket. I watched his eyes move across the screen. The color left his face so quickly it was almost elegant. "What is it?" Vanessa asked. Blake did not answer. He read the message twice, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less dangerous. Emergency meeting of the Sterling Dynamics board. 8 o'clock the next morning. Mandatory attendance. Immediate suspension of contract authority pending special audit. "There must be some mistake," he muttered. I lifted my whiskey and let the silence settle around us. Blake looked at me, finally noticing that I was the only person at the table who wasn't surprised. "What did you do?" he asked. I took one slow sip. "Nothing you haven't already done to yourself." Vanessa stared at me, her confidence beginning to crack. Blake's phone rang. The name on the screen was Walter Pierce, Sterling's CEO. He stood abruptly and stepped away from the table. I could still hear Walter's voice through the speaker, sharp with panic. Blake, don't sign anything. Don't delete anything. And whatever you do, do not leave that restaurant before Mr. Caldwell does. Blake turned toward me. For the first time that evening, he was no longer smiling. I placed my glass on the white tablecloth. Enjoy the rest of your dinner, I said. It may be the last one your company ever pays for. 72 hours before Blake's phone started vibrating at that table, I was sitting alone in my home office with a cup of coffee gone cold beside my keyboard and a report that was never supposed to become personal. It arrived every quarter from Daniel Brooks, my attorney and the only man outside the board who understood exactly how much of Sterling Dynamics still belonged to me. Usually, I skimmed the numbers, checked the risk summaries, and moved on. That night, one line stopped me. Hospitality expense, $4,800. The charge came from the Langham Hotel in Chicago. Executive Suite. 2 nights. Filed under Client Development by Blake Harrison. The client name was missing. That alone was enough to make me look closer. Sterling had rules. Every major expense required a project code, a client contact, and a written purpose. Blake had submitted none of them. Instead, Vanessa had approved the reimbursement through the marketing division. My wife's name sat at the bottom of the page in clean digital ink. Approved. No questions. No explanation. I told myself there could be an innocent reason. That was the lie I needed for another 30 seconds. Then I opened the attached receipts. Room service for 2. Champagne. A bracelet from a boutique inside the hotel. Dinner at a private rooftop restaurant on a night Vanessa told me she was attending a regional strategy conference in Milwaukee. She had kissed my cheek before leaving. Told me not to wait up. I remembered standing in the kitchen, holding the coffee mug she had forgotten, watching her taillights disappear through the rain. Betrayal rarely enters like thunder. Sometimes it arrives as a reimbursement request. Quiet. Numbered. Signed by the person you trusted most. I kept scrolling. There were more charges. New York. Boston. Denver. 12 months of hotels disguised as business travel. Jewelry hidden beneath vendor entertainment. Weekend flights booked under marketing outreach. Vanessa's approval appeared again and again. The room around me felt smaller. The house was silent except for the low hum of the air conditioner and the old clock above the shelves marking each second like it had somewhere important to be. My hand stayed still. That surprised me. People imagine rage as heat. Mine was cold. Precise. I opened Sterling's internal calendar and matched every trip against Vanessa's stories. Her mother's birthday. A women's leadership retreat. A client emergency. Each excuse lined up perfectly with Blake's expenses. Almost perfectly. One trip did not. Phoenix. 3 days. No hotel charge. No dinner. No bracelet. Just a private aviation invoice billed to a consulting project I had never approved. I searched the project code. The file was restricted. That should have been impossible. I entered the owner credentials Daniel had created years ago. The folder opened. Inside were draft acquisition models, employee reduction forecasts, and a presentation titled Project North Star. Blake's name appeared on the first page. Vanessa's appeared on the distribution list. The proposal recommended selling Sterling's manufacturing division to Halcyon Capital, stripping its patents, and eliminating nearly 2,000 jobs before the end of the year. My wife had not just been sleeping with a man who worked for me. She had been helping him prepare to dismantle the company I had spent 16 years building. I called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. "Tell me you're looking at North Star," he said. "I'm looking at it." There was a pause. "Then you already know this is bigger than an affair." I stared at Vanessa's signature on the final approval memo. The woman who thought I had no ambition had been helping another man steal the result of mine. "Freeze nothing yet," I said. "Let them keep moving." Daniel went silent. He knew what that meant. We would watch. We would document. And when they finally believed they had won, I would close the door behind them. 16 years earlier, before Sterling Dynamics had glass towers, private dining rooms, and executives who mistook expensive suits for authority, I worked out of a rented warehouse that smelled like dust, hot wires, and burnt coffee. The roof leaked whenever it rained. The heating failed every winter. My first 3 employees sat at folding tables beneath fluorescent lights that flickered like they were considering giving up. We built industrial control software for factories no one else wanted to modernize. The contracts were small. The hours were brutal. Most nights, I slept on a couch beside the server rack because driving home felt like wasted time. I was 30 years old, stubborn, underfunded, and convinced that effort could solve anything. Back then, Vanessa admired that about me. She would bring dinner in paper bags and sit on the warehouse floor while I explained systems she barely understood. She said my ambition made the room feel electric. I believed her. When our first major client signed, we celebrated with cheap champagne poured into plastic cups. When we missed payroll by 3 days, she held my hand and told me we would survive. We did. Meridian Software grew from 3 employees to 40, then 200, then more than 1,000 across 6 states. We built systems that controlled assembly lines, energy grids, and logistics networks. My name appeared in magazines. People invited me to conferences to explain how I had done it. The truth was less impressive than the articles. I had simply refused to stop. Then Sterling Dynamics began to collapse. Its technology was outdated, its debt was crushing, and its board had spent years protecting executives instead of employees. Everyone else saw a dying company. I saw 1,200 skilled workers who deserved better leadership. Meridian bought Sterling through a restructuring deal no one thought would succeed. We replaced the debt, modernized the systems, and kept every plant open. 3 years later, Sterling was profitable again. That should have been the moment I felt victorious. Instead, I was exhausted. I had missed anniversaries, holidays, funerals, and too many quiet evenings that could never be recovered. One night, I collapsed in an airport lounge after 70 hours without real sleep. The doctor called it severe exhaustion. Vanessa called it a warning. She sat beside my hospital bed and said, "I don't need a famous husband. I need one who comes home." So I stepped back. I transferred my controlling interest into a blind trust, placed professional managers in public-facing roles, and disappeared from the industry press. Walter Pierce became CEO of Sterling. Daniel managed the legal structure. I kept the voting power, but I stopped attending galas and interviews. I worked from home, reviewed quarterly reports, and tried to become the man Vanessa said she wanted. At first, she was grateful. Then gratitude turned into comfort. Comfort turned into assumption. Somewhere along the way, my sacrifice stopped looking like love and started looking like weakness. Vanessa's career began to rise inside Sterling's marketing division. I introduced her to people, opened doors, and then made sure no one knew I had done it. She believed she had climbed alone. I let her. Pride can be dangerous, even when it belongs to someone you love. Over time, she began telling people I had sold my company and lost my purpose. She described my silence as failure. She called my freedom unemployment. The strange part was that I never corrected her. I thought a marriage should be strong enough to survive without titles. I thought she remembered the warehouse, the plastic cups, and the nights we planned our future on concrete floors. I was wrong. Vanessa had not forgotten the story. She had rewritten it. In her version, she became the ambitious one, and I became the man who stopped trying. That was the version Blake heard. It was the version he mocked at dinner. What neither of them understood was that I had never walked away from my empire. I had only stepped out of the light, and darkness had given me a much clearer view of what they were doing. By the time Vanessa invited me to dinner with Blake, I already knew what they had done. I knew about the hotels, the bracelet, the flights, and the acquisition plan hidden behind the name Project North Star. I knew Blake was using my company's money to sleep with my wife, and I knew Vanessa had helped him gather the information he needed to cut Sterling apart. What I did not know was how far they would go when they believed I was powerless. So I accepted the invitation. Vanessa called it a casual dinner with colleagues. Her voice was light, almost generous, as if she were offering me a rare chance to enter her professional world. "Try to dress appropriately," she added. "Blake's bringing senior people." I looked at the phone after she hung up. 16 years earlier, she had sat on a warehouse floor beside me while I wore a sweatshirt stained with machine grease. Now she worried I might embarrass her in a restaurant owned by a group whose financing I had approved. I arrived 5 minutes late on purpose. The private dining room overlooked the river, all amber glass and polished walnut. Blake sat at the center of the table like a man practicing for a throne. Vanessa was beside him. My chair waited across from them. Not beside my wife. Across. That told me everything. 2 Sterling executives were already seated, both eager to laugh before Blake finished a sentence. A bottle of Burgundy rested in an ice bucket near his elbow. He had ordered the most expensive one on the list. Corporate account, of course. Ethan, Blake said, rising just enough to pretend respect. Glad you could make it. Vanessa's eyes moved over my charcoal suit, searching for something to criticize. She found nothing, which seemed to disappoint her. I sat down. Blake began performing immediately. Revenue numbers, expansion plans, names of investors he claimed to know. Every story ended with him as the smartest man in the room. Vanessa watched him with the attention she used to give me. That hurt more than I expected. Not because I wanted her admiration back, but because I remembered what it had cost me to earn it the first time. Halfway through the first course, Blake placed a hand on the back of her chair. His thumb brushed her shoulder. Neither of them looked at me. It was not affection. It was theater. They wanted me to see. Vanessa began describing my early retirement to the others. She said I had lost interest in business after selling my old company. She laughed about how I spent my days reading reports and making coffee. He's still figuring out what comes next, she said. Blake smiled at me. Must be nice. Some of us carry real responsibility. I cut into my steak and let him continue. Silence makes arrogant people nervous. They fill it with evidence. He boasted that Walter had promised him the CEO position once Northstar closed. He said Sterling needed leadership willing to make hard decisions. By hard decisions, he meant firing people whose names he had never learned. 2,000 jobs, I said. Blake paused. What? That's the number in the reduction model, isn't it? Vanessa's fork stopped against her plate. Blake recovered quickly. I don't know what you think you've seen. Neither do I said. That's why I'm listening. His smile returned, thinner now. He leaned back and lifted his wine. You know what your problem is, Ethan? You mistake observation for influence. Vanessa laughed. Then she delivered the line she had probably rehearsed with him. At least Blake knows what an ambitious man looks like. The others joined in. I checked my watch. 9:17. The audit package was ready. The board notice was drafted. I sent Daniel one word. Proceed. Blake kept laughing for another 6 seconds. Then his phone began to vibrate. The first vibration came beneath Blake's laughter. He glanced at his phone, saw the screen, and turned it face down beside his plate. The second came before the room had fully settled. The third rattled against the polished wood hard enough to silence the executive beside him. Blake picked it up with the irritation of a man accustomed to other people waiting. His expression changed before he finished reading. The confidence did not disappear all at once. It fractured. First his jaw tightened. Then his eyes narrowed. Then the color drained from his face. Vanessa leaned closer. What happened? Nothing, he said too quickly. Men like Blake always call danger nothing when witnesses are present. He looked toward the door as a server entered carrying a thick cream envelope on a silver tray. Mr. Harrison? The server asked. Blake stared at him. Yes. This was delivered for you. He took the envelope without thanking him. Sterling Dynamics was printed across the upper corner. Beneath it sat the seal of Caldwell Meridian Holdings. Blake did not recognize the second name. Vanessa did. I saw it in the way her fingers stopped around the stem of her glass. Years earlier, that name had appeared on tax documents she never bothered to read. It had been embossed on folders in my office. It had been written above the warehouse door where our marriage began. She looked at me, but I kept my attention on Blake. He tore open the envelope. 4 documents slid onto the table. The first was a notice of special audit. The second ordered the immediate preservation of all company emails, phones, expense records, and private communications related to Project Northstar. The third suspended his authority to approve contracts or move corporate funds. The fourth required his attendance at an emergency board meeting at 8 o'clock the next morning. Blake read each page twice. This is ridiculous, he said. No one laughed. One of the executives beside him quietly moved his chair back. Distance is the first form of loyalty in a corporate crisis. Walter didn't authorize this, Blake said. He doesn't have to, I replied. His eyes lifted toward me. What does that mean? It means you should keep reading. At the bottom of the final page was Daniel Brooks's signature, followed by a line Blake could no longer pretend not to understand. Issued under the authority of the controlling shareholder. His phone rang. Walter Pierce. Blake stood so fast his chair scraped across the floor. He answered and stepped toward the window, but the room was too quiet to protect him. Walter, what the hell is this? There was a pause. Even from across the table, I could hear Walter's voice, thin and urgent. Do not delete anything. Blake turned slightly away from us. I haven't done anything. Then you have nothing to worry about. Another pause. Is Ethan Caldwell still there? Blake looked at me. Why? Walter's answer came lower, but every person at the table heard it. Because you need to stop talking. Vanessa's face had gone pale. Ethan, she whispered, what is happening? I folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate. An audit? You can't order an audit. No, I said. But the controlling shareholder can. Blake ended the call and walked back toward the table, trying to rebuild the posture he had worn 10 minutes earlier. You're bluffing. Call Daniel Brooks. Who? The attorney listed on the notice. His hand tightened around the papers. Vanessa looked from him to me, searching our faces for the version of reality she understood. It was gone. How do you know about North Star? She asked. That question changed the room. Blake's head snapped toward her. One executive lowered his eyes. The other reached for his phone. Vanessa realized too late that she had just confirmed the project existed. I watched Blake understand the same thing. The silence became heavy enough to feel. You should both get some sleep, I said, rising from my chair. Tomorrow will require clear memories. Blake stepped in front of me. You think you can walk in and destroy my career? I met his eyes. No, Blake. I think you already did that. I left him standing beneath the amber lights with the envelope crushed in his hand and my wife staring at a company seal she should have remembered. Behind me, no one laughed. At 2:13 that morning, Daniel called me from Sterling's legal office. I was still awake. Sleep belongs to men who believe tomorrow will resemble today. I no longer had that luxury. We found the source, he said. His voice was quiet, stripped of everything except fact. I stood beside the kitchen window while rain tapped against the glass. What source? The North Star documents. Blake didn't get them from Walter. A file appeared in my inbox before he finished speaking. I opened it on my laptop. The first page was an email chain between Vanessa and Blake. My wife's name sat above words I had never imagined her writing. Ethan still receives ownership reports. He keeps copies in his private office. I can access them when he's out. Beneath that was Blake's reply. We only need voting schedules and debt exposure. Nothing traceable. The cold I had felt while reading the hotel receipts returned, but this time it settled deeper. An affair was betrayal of a marriage. This was betrayal with architecture. Dates. Attachments. Instructions. Vanessa had photographed documents from my desk, forwarded private emails, and copied notes from calls she believed were investment discussions. She thought she was helping Blake secure a promotion. In reality, she had given him a map to the company's control structure. How much did she send? I asked. Daniel exhaled. Enough to predict when the trust would vote. Enough to identify 2 vulnerable board members. Enough to let Halcyon build pressure before the acquisition. I scrolled through the messages. Blake praised her, called her brilliant, told her she understood power better than I ever had. Vanessa responded with a sentence that made my hand tighten around the edge of the desk. Ethan never notices anything anymore. I looked toward the dark hallway leading to our bedroom. Her side of the closet was still full. Her perfume still lingered near the stairs. The house carried every sign of a marriage except trust. There's more, Daniel said. Another attachment opened. It was a recorded call between Blake and a representative from Halcyon Capital. They discussed forcing a liquidity crisis, replacing Walter, and selling Sterling's patents within 90 days. Manufacturing plants would close first. Pension obligations would be transferred. 2,000 employees would become numbers in a reduction column. Then Blake mentioned Vanessa. She can influence Caldwell if necessary. He still listens to her. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because arrogance often mistakes access for control. Blake believed my wife could guide me towards signing away the company. Vanessa believed she was helping the man she loved become CEO. Neither understood that Halcyon planned to discard them both once the deal closed. Does Vanessa know the full plan? I asked. No, Daniel said. From what we found, Blake only showed her the promotion story. She knows she shared confidential information. She doesn't know about the plant closures. That distinction mattered legally. It did not matter to me as a husband. She had opened the door without asking what waited outside. I closed the laptop and stared at my reflection in the black screen. For years, Vanessa accused me of lacking ambition. Now she had risked thousands of livelihoods to borrow some from another man. Preserve everything, I said. Phones, cloud accounts, deleted messages, personal devices. Already in motion. And Daniel? Yes. Do not warn her. The silence between us lasted one beat. Understood. After the call ended, I walked upstairs. Vanessa was asleep on her side, one hand beneath the pillow, breathing with the calm of someone who still believed consequences belong to other people. Her phone rested on the nightstand. A message preview glowed across the screen. Blake, tomorrow we take control. I stood there until the light faded. Then I understood the truth. The board meeting would not simply expose an affair. It would reveal that my wife had helped plan the theft of my company. And by sunrise, the man she mocked would hold both their futures in his hands. At 7:58 the next morning, the boardroom on the 42nd floor of Sterling Dynamics was already full. 12 leather chairs surrounded a table long enough to make distance feel official. Rain pressed against the windows, turning Chicago into a gray blur beneath us. Walter Pierce sat near the head of the table, pale beneath the fluorescent lights. Daniel stood beside the presentation screen with 3 sealed folders arranged in front of him. No one spoke above a whisper. Then the doors opened. Blake walked in first. He wore the same navy suit from dinner, though the collar was open and his confidence looked borrowed. A lawyer followed him carrying a briefcase. Vanessa came behind them in a cream coat, her face composed with the careful stillness she used whenever she believed appearances could control reality. She stopped when she saw me. I was seated at the head of the table. For 1 second, nobody moved. Blake recovered first. What is he doing here? Walter looked down at his hands. Vanessa stepped toward me. Ethan, this has gone far enough. I did not answer her. I glanced at the clock. 8 o'clock. Daniel closed the doors. Blake's lawyer placed his briefcase on the table. My client objects to the presence of an unauthorized individual during a confidential board session. Daniel nodded once. Your objection is noted. Then remove him. No, Daniel said. Mr. Caldwell called the meeting. Blake laughed, but the sound died quickly. He doesn't have that authority. Daniel pressed a button. The screen behind him lit with a corporate ownership chart. At the top sat Caldwell Meridian Holdings. Beneath it were 2 holding companies, a blind trust, and a line connecting them to Sterling Dynamics. 82% voting control. The room became silent. Vanessa stared at the screen, then at me. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Daniel continued. Caldwell Meridian Holdings is the controlling shareholder of Sterling Dynamics. Mr. Ethan Caldwell is its founder, sole beneficial owner, and final voting authority. Blake shook his head. That's impossible. No, I said. It's documented. You sold Meridian. I sold a minority operating division. I never sold control. Walter finally looked up. His voice was barely audible. I tried to tell you to stop talking last night. Blake turned on him. You knew? Walter said nothing. That silence was his confession. Vanessa stepped closer to the table. Ethan, why didn't you tell me? The question landed strangely. Not why had she betrayed me. Not why had she shared confidential files. Why? Had I failed to warn her that the man she mocked still had power? I did tell you, I said. 16 years ago. You were there when I built it. Her face tightened. Blake placed both palms on the table. This is personal retaliation. He found out about Vanessa and me, and now he's abusing shareholder authority. Daniel opened the first folder. This meeting concerns Project North Star, unauthorized disclosure of confidential ownership information, misuse of corporate funds, and attempted manipulation of a pending acquisition. Blake's expression changed, just slightly, but I saw it. Daniel displayed the hotel invoices first, then the private flights, then the emails Vanessa had forwarded from my office. Each page appeared on the screen with dates, signatures, and access logs. Vanessa looked at Blake. You said those files were for your promotion review. He did not look back. The recorded call began. Blake's voice filled the room, discussing plant closures, patent liquidation, pension transfers, and the elimination of nearly 2,000 jobs. Vanessa sank into the nearest chair. That wasn't the plan you showed me, she whispered. Blake turned toward her. Don't say anything. I watched the command in his voice replace affection. For the first time, she saw the man she had chosen without the light he used to flatter her. Daniel stopped the recording. Blake pointed at me. You think owning shares makes you untouchable? No, I said. It makes me responsible. I stood slowly and placed both hands on the table. You spent a year pretending Walter was the only man above you. You used my company to finance your affair, stole confidential information from my home, and planned to destroy the livelihoods of people who built this place. Blake's jaw tightened. I held his eyes. You never worked for Walter. No one breathed. You worked for me. Blake was still standing when Daniel opened the second folder. The confidence had left his face, but something uglier remained. Defiance. Men like him rarely accept consequences at first. They negotiate with them. Fine, he said. Suspend me. I'll take the investigation. But you don't have enough to destroy my career. I looked at Daniel. He pressed another key. A sequence of documents appeared on the screen. Vendor contracts awarded to a consulting firm owned by Blake's brother-in-law. Inflated invoices routed through a shell company in Delaware. Sales forecasts altered 3 days before quarterly reporting. Deleted emails recovered from an archived server. Each file carried a date, a signature, and the kind of detail arrogance never thinks to erase. Blake's lawyer leaned toward him and whispered something urgent. Blake ignored him. Those numbers are being taken out of context. Then let's add context, Daniel said. The recording resumed. This time, Blake's voice discussed delaying payments to create the appearance of a cash crisis. He planned to frighten the board, force a sale, and collect a private bonus from Halcyon Capital after the layoffs began. The amount was $12 million. Vanessa covered her mouth. Walter closed his eyes. Around the table, board members who had once laughed at Blake's jokes now watched him like a contaminated object. Loyalty disappears quickly when prison becomes possible. Blake pointed at me. This is because of her. His voice cracked as he gestured toward Vanessa. You're doing this because she chose me. I stood at the head of the table and felt nothing I had expected to feel. No satisfaction. No triumph. Just clarity. Your affair ended my marriage, I said. Your fraud ended your career. Do not confuse the two. Daniel distributed written resolutions. The first terminated Blake Harrison for cause, effective immediately. The second referred the evidence to outside counsel for civil recovery and possible criminal investigation. The third froze every bonus, stock option, and deferred payment attached to his contract. Blake read the pages, and the last piece of pride fell from his face. Losing the job had frightened him. Losing the money broke him. You can't take everything, he whispered. I'm not taking anything, I said. The company is recovering what you stole. Security entered quietly through the side door. Blake's lawyer finally grabbed his arm. Say nothing else. But Blake looked at Vanessa instead. Tell them you approved it. She stared at him as if she had never seen him before. You told me it was legitimate. You signed it. Because I trusted you. He laughed once, bitter and small. Then that was your mistake. The words landed harder than any accusation I could have made. Vanessa's face collapsed. In that moment, she understood what she had traded our marriage for. Not love. Not a future. A man searching for someone else to blame. Security escorted Blake from the room. His shoes struck the marble hallway in sharp, fading beats. No one watched him leave except Vanessa. Then Daniel turned to Walter. The CEO's resignation letter was already waiting. Walter had ignored warnings, concealed irregularities, and protected Blake to preserve his own position. He signed without argument. His hand shook once. Vanessa remained seated while the independent committee reviewed her role. Her access was suspended. Her company devices were collected. Her employment would be decided without my involvement. I wanted that clear. I would not use corporate power to settle a private wound. When the room emptied, she stood across from me, pale and trembling. Ethan, please. We can fix this. I reached into my coat and placed my wedding ring on the table. Beside it, Daniel set a sealed envelope. Vanessa opened it and saw the divorce petition. Her breath caught. You planned this. No, I said. You did. I'm only signing the result. I walked toward the door. Behind me, she called my name the way she had in the warehouse 16 years earlier. Back then, I would have turned around. This time, I kept walking. 6 months later, Sterling Dynamics held its annual leadership dinner in the same restaurant where Blake had laughed at me. The room had not changed. Amber lights still warmed the dark wood. Rain still blurred the city beyond the glass. The same white tablecloths covered the tables. But the silence that followed me through the doors felt different. People stood. Not because I demanded it. Not because my name appeared on the ownership documents. They stood because the company was still alive. Claire Bennett had become CEO by unanimous vote. She reopened the plants North Star had marked for closure, restored the pension contributions Walter had delayed, and promoted managers who had spent years doing the work while men like Blake collected the credit. Sterling posted its strongest quarter in a decade. 2,000 people still had jobs. That mattered more than any apology. Claire met me near the entrance and shook my hand. You know they're going to expect a speech. I've disappointed larger rooms. She smiled. That's why they trust you. I took my seat near the employees who had been with Sterling before the glass tower, before the private dining rooms, before executives learned to speak about layoffs as if they were weather. One of them was a machinist named Thomas Reed. He had worked at the Ohio plant for 27 years. My daughter starts college next month, he told me. North Star would have ended that. I looked down at the table. For months, people had called what happened revenge. They saw the boardroom, the termination papers, the investigation, and the divorce. They did not see Thomas. They did not see the families attached to every number Blake planned to erase. Power is not the ability to destroy someone. It is the responsibility to protect people they never noticed. Blake eventually accepted a civil settlement. His stock options were canceled, his assets were used to repay part of the stolen money, and the investigation followed him long after his name disappeared from Sterling's website. Walter retired quietly. No farewell dinner. No engraved watch. Just an empty office and a cardboard box. Vanessa was dismissed after the independent committee completed its review. She called me often at first. Some messages were angry. Some were apologies. Others sounded like negotiations disguised as memories. She said she had been confused. She said Blake manipulated her. She said she never understood what Sterling meant to me. The last one was the closest she came to the truth. Our divorce became final on a cold Thursday morning. She waited outside the courthouse beneath a gray sky, wearing the same cream coat she had worn to the board meeting. You could have told me, she said. I knew exactly what she meant. You could have told me you still owned everything. I studied her face and remembered the woman on the warehouse floor, drinking cheap champagne from a plastic cup. For years, I had wondered where that woman went. Now I understood. She had not disappeared. She had simply chosen what mattered more. That was always the problem, I said. You're sorry you didn't know what I owned. You're not sorry you forgot who I was. Her eyes filled, but I felt no victory. Some endings are too expensive to celebrate. That evening, after the leadership dinner, I drove past the old warehouse. Another company occupied it now, but the original brick remained beneath a new sign. I parked across the street and sat there with the engine running. My phone lit up. The divorce order had been finalized. For a moment, I held the screen in my hand. 16 years of marriage reduced to a legal notification and a case number. Then Thomas sent me a photograph of his daughter holding her college acceptance letter. I turned off the phone. The rain had stopped. Light from the warehouse spilled across the wet pavement, bright and uneven, like the first morning after a storm. I had spent years believing silence meant weakness. Blake believed it too. Vanessa mistook it for surrender. But silence had never meant I had nothing to say. It meant I was waiting until my actions could speak without me. I put the car in drive and left the warehouse behind. For the first time in years, I was not returning to an empty marriage or a hidden empire. I was simply going home.